Okay. Okay, I'd like to call the Huron County Library Board meeting to order at 9 a.m. on January the 15th, 2025. Happy New Year, everyone. Nice that we're able to still have meetings virtually. As we can see, the majority of the people are virtual with us this morning. Winter is here. We're not used to winter for the past 2 years, so we're finally having a winter. So thanks for everyone that's able to join online this morning and here in the boardroom as well. At this time, I will look for a motion that we do approve the agenda, that the library board agenda for January 15th, 2025 be approved as presented. Do I have a mover, please? Helena moves and a seconder, Patricia. Any questions regarding the agenda? Not seeing any. Okay, all in favor? Carried. Does any member of the board have a declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Not seeing any hands. We can move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which is the minutes of the Huron County Library Board meeting of December 11th, 2024 be adopted as circulated. Do I have a motion to move those? John Becker moves and Nick seconds. Any questions regarding those minutes? Helena.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the process of selecting a chair that was done by a motion rather than nominations and elections. Is there a different process in Huron County other than you don't follow Robert's Rules of Order?
We follow our procedural bylaw, sorry.
No, you got the answer. I don't.
Yeah,
so,
we follow our procedural bylaw. I can send that to you. I can open it. But yes, the chair calls the warden in this case, because it was the first meeting of with the new term. The warden opens the meeting, calls for the election, for the nominations, calls for it 3 times. And then whoever's nominated, they ask if they accept the nomination. And then if they do, we get a motion, we pass the motion.
Okay, so we didn't follow the procedure.
Okay, what do you, can you tell us more about it?
And I was very surprised, but there was no call for nominations. So there was no open call for nominations.
If
Just
I remember correctly, warden, you did call if there's.
I thought I called 3 times.
And then Councillor Becker nominated Councillor Bazinet.
No, the process started with a motion to nominate and
The meeting is recorded, correct?
Yeah.
The previous meeting, so that's something to
Yes.
go back and look on.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, the meeting is posted on YouTube, so if
Yeah.
did you watch the meeting after, and this is where you are coming from?
well, I was surprised at the meeting that
I think best we go back and look and see and
Yeah.
make sure we
Yeah.
followed the procedure as we should have.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah, I didn't have a. Yeah, because I think the problem is that the idea that it's a motion to nominate. So one individual is nominated and it's not an open nomination, open to anybody else.
If I remember correctly, we did have everything outlined for you, warden. Your first step is call for nominations. We got a nomination from Councillor Becker. Warden asked Councillor Bazinet if he accepts the nomination. He said yes, and then we passed the motion after that. So there was a nomination, and the motion was passed after Councillor Bazinet accepted. And we did the same process for the vice chair.
Any other follow-ups, Helena, regarding that? We can go back and look at the tape as well, the recording, because it was recorded, and to make sure the procedure was handled properly.
Yeah, I guess,
Follow.
yeah. The normal procedure according to Robert's Rule of Orders, not to call for a motion, but to call for nominations. And there can be any number of nominations. Once you call 3 times and there's no further nominations, then you either have an election, or if there's only one nomination, then you have a motion to accept by acclamation.
Yeah,
The motion comes after the nominations.
that's what
No.
happened in this case.
No, according to the minutes,
Oh,
was requested a motion to nominate a chair
okay,
and then moved by Becker and seconded by that Trevor be nominated.
be elected, okay.
No, nominated.
Okay, I can change the minutes to say that in the motion that Councillor Bazinet was elected. We are trying to follow Robert's
Yeah.
rules, of course, but we go by a procedural bylaw. So we did have, like I said, we had the steps outlined for Warden in this case to handle the nominations and the election of chair and vice chair. I'm not sure if there's any suggestions that we should change the minutes to say elected instead of nominated for the motion. We can do that.
That would make better sense, but I think
course,
more for
okay.
the future that make sure that there's no motion to until after open nominations.
Yeah,
So don't start with a motion and that if somebody else wanted to step up and volunteer, that would have,
of course.
there was, it went so fast.
Yeah, but as I remember, we did the nominations first. That's how we got to Councillor Becker, Councillor Bazinet, who was nominated by Councillor Becker. So we did handle the nominations first. Once he accepted, then we passed the motion you passed the motion as a board that
Yeah.
he be elected as a chair.
And I remember the warden asking for a first, second, and third time
Yeah.
at that meeting, but
So I believe it was handled.
So Helena, are you satisfied if we just make sure we check the procedure and next time just be double sure that we're doing it correctly?
Yeah, there's no motions until after all the
Yep.
nominations are in.
I think,
okay.
so I think that's the point we're looking at is
Yeah.
moving forward, to just make sure that we're very clear on procedure.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yep.
thanks for bringing that forward, Helena. So we do have a mover and seconder to the previous minutes, so I will call the question, all in favor? Okay, carried. Presentations, so this is where, you know, our fantastic Beth Rumble comes into play here. She's gonna be speaking for the rest of the meeting, I think, by the looks of things. So Beth, yeah, the number one in the presentations is the board orientation. So the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So this presentation will serve as an orientation to members who are new to the library board, but I think it is also a great refresher as we are approximately halfway through the full term of the four-year library board to serve as a refresher. And also, as we will discuss later in the agenda, some of the findings from the board self-evaluation. Some of this I think will be useful in addressing a portion of those questions or concerns as well. So Lisa, if you can go to the next slide. And bear with me, this is a bit of a compilation of presentations that were done over the course of 3 meetings initially. So I've taken the key aspects and combined them all into one. So I will move through this as efficiently as I can to make sure that you get the information you need. So starting with the library board, just that overview that we generally meet the second Wednesday of every month. Make sure you're looking at the calendar. There are a couple of Thursdays in there. And the reminder that we no longer meet in February, July, or September. Previously in legislation, the library board was required to meet 10 times a year. In 2019, that changed to 7. So we still hold more than the 7 meetings. So if we ever need to cancel one for whatever reason, we will not be at risk of not meeting that requirement. And the composition of the library board is 2 members of county council, the warden of the county, as well as 5 members that are appointed from the community. Next slide, please, Lisa. So the structure of the board, we have our chair, Councillor Bazinet, our vice chair, Nick Kester. The CEO is myself, the county librarian. We also have every board needs a treasurer. that is myself, but that is primarily, a lot of that is done through the Treasury Department. But the board does need someone named as the treasurer. We have our secretary, and that is the county clerk or deputy county clerk. And we also do have our advocacy committee. So that is a group that will decide what advocacy efforts we want to undertake in a given year. The members on that committee currently are Jane Morton, Sydney Wetwaffer, and Patricia Smith. Historically, we've met with agricultural societies throughout the county, chambers of commerce and BIAs, the Friends of the Library groups. Most recently, we created an advocacy video that was used during initial orientation. And last year we met with groups serving youth organizations in the county. We are in 2025 looking at creating a different type of video promoting library services, something more that can be used on our social media channels. And lastly, we have our OLS, the Ontario Library Service Trustee, that's Jane Morton, that attends biannual meetings, and then she will bring back reports from there, as she did at a recent meeting, just sharing what is happening at other library boards throughout the province. Next slide, Lisa. Thanks. So to speak a little bit more to the role of the library board is a governance board, so they oversee the purpose, plans, and policies of the library. This includes things like financial oversight, monitoring library performance, reviewing and approving policies, setting the strategy and oversight of that strategy, appointing the CEO and supporting the CEO, as well as advocacy. The board is the legal authority for the organization, is responsible for the highest level of decision-making, and direction is provided through motions, policies, budget, and the strategic plan. It's important to note that the board does act as a whole and not individually. And when we speak to a governance board, that's that you're not here to run the library, but ensure that the library is run well. You are the how, staff are the, you are the what, staff are the how. The board sets the direction and staff do the paddling to get to the direction that the board has set. Next slide, please. I think it's important that everyone is aware of the legislative framework within which we operate. So there is the Public Libraries Act, first and foremost, but there's also the Municipal Act, Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, the Child, Youth and Family Services Act, Occupational Health and Safety, Criminal Code, Charter of Rights and Freedoms are all legislation that we make sure that we operate within and that guide some of the decisions that we do make. Next slide, please, Levita. So looking provincially, the libraries are included in the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Gaming. We receive an annual grant from the province from that ministry. And there's also the Ontario Library Service that you'll hear mentioned somewhat frequently. And that's a provincial organization that operates on the behalf of the ministry to increase cooperation and communication amongst libraries in Ontario. Next slide. So to speak more specifically to the Ontario Public Libraries Act, starting off with a summary, it was originally enacted in 1882, and it established free access to library service through a municipal levy and governed by the board that's appointed locally. Major responsibilities of that board, as indicated in the Act, are to be accountable to the municipal council, to provide the free library service that reflects the community, and to report to the province. Current library board members, you will have the full Public Libraries Act on the USB that was initially provided to you. It is also available on the web. And Jamie and Trevor, I do have USB sticks for both of you that have this information on it. Next slide, please, Levita. Just going more specifically into the Public Libraries Act, when it speaks to the requirement to provide free library service, that includes admission to the library spaces, access to reference services, and borrowing. However, there are exceptions to free indicated in that act. So that's parts of the library, parts of the building that aren't used for library purposes. So when we read that, that's mostly speaking to our meeting spaces that we can charge certain groups for renting out those spaces, and also services for non-residents. We do have reciprocal borrowing agreements with most of, I believe all, of the systems that border Huron County. So we don't see a lot of what we call non-resident fee charges. However, if someone from Toronto wanted to access our services, there would be a $70 fee for them to get a Huron County Library card, and that is absolutely within the act that we can do so. And just a note that should we want to close a library branch, a triple majority would be required, that the library board needs to agree that that branch would close. The municipality in which that library resides would need to agree that the branch would close, and so does county council. Question?
I would assume that the same applies to open a branch.
Yes, it is. That is in the act. I would need to refresh myself with that particular instance, but yes, there is always the possibility that a community may want to open a branch, and then the same discussions would occur at those 3 levels. Next slide, please, Levitsa. And this slide is just to make sure everyone is fully aware that there are some instances which would disqualify you as a member of the library board. They are listed here. It is also, there are requirements that you must meet. All of you meet those, or else you would not have been invited to be on the library board, and that is included in the act. What is laid out in the act that allows you to be on the library board. Next slide, please, Levitsa. I do just want to make sure that everyone's aware of several development opportunities. Should you be interested in learning more about libraries and what it means to be on the library board. We do have the Ontario Library Association Super Conference that happens annually, usually at the end of January, where there's lots of information sessions about libraries and a specific library board boot camp that usually occurs on a Saturday. There are the Ontario Library Service trustee meetings. Jane is our representative. However, any board members are welcome to also attend those. Jane would be the one that would report back on any information that she feels would be relevant to the board from those, though. Ontario Library Service does have a board briefs podcast. They don't have a regular recording schedule. They haven't recorded anything in the last, when I looked, I think it was in the last year, but even going back to when they started it a couple of years ago, there may be some relevant kind of introductory podcast episodes about library boards specifically. There is also governance training through LearnHQ, which is the learning portal that's provided through Ontario Library Service. So if anyone is interested in exploring that more and isn't set up in LearnHQ, feel free to reach out and I can assist you with that. Also through things like this, staff presentations, we will bring in our branch managers to talk about what's happening locally in their teams, as well as administration staff to talk more specifically about what's happening in technical services or with programming, as Jim did previously. And then we do have our, maybe not monthly anymore, but those council trainings and education sessions. The next one coming up is on January 18th, and everyone is invited to attend that. And lastly, there is a website specifically dedicated to boards and trustees. That's the OLS Governance Hub, and the URL is there, that they have lots of information about library boards on that website too for further reading. Next slide, please, Levitsa. So here's just an overall organizational chart of the library, and I'll go into the next couple of slides talking about what happens at the various levels there. So next slide, Levitsa. So first, the role of the library, we are very service oriented. We provide a few different types of services, our traditional services that maybe are more top of mind, like readers advisory, circulation, providing book lists, things like knitting groups, after school programming, crafting. Some of our newer services that we provide are those social groups like coffee and conversation, puzzle competitions. We also have our tech time offerings, virtual reality, and we lend things in our object library such as snowshoes. And then we have our virtual services. So these are our cloud library for ebooks, e-audio, Hoopla, which is more of a streaming digital service, Canopy. We provide our PebbleGo and Mango, which is online learning. And then the lending of our Wi-Fi hubs I also included in there. And we really aim to connect patrons to the programs and services that meet their needs. And we very strongly believe that the library is a community hub, and that is where folks come to be connected to their community. Next slide, please. So at the administration level, lots of things happening administratively at the admin office in Clinton and through the staff that work there. Things like support to the library board, collection development happens there. our strategic planning and executing that, financial services in coordination with the county treasury department, human resources, again, through support with the county HR department, office support, marketing, partnership development, partnership maintenance, the maintenance of the e-resources, and our the support for staff training all happen administratively. Next slide, Lisa. We also have our technical services department. So these responsibilities include our integrated library system. That is essentially our catalog, the front-facing side, and then the back-end side that staff manage so that people can search and find all of the materials that they want to borrow, and the IT support that goes along with that. Technical services takes care of the cataloging of all of our books and processing the new books as they're added to the collection. They also oversee the van delivery. That includes 4 days a week. The van goes a loop around visiting all 12 branches. Some days it's only 11. Howick and Kirkton don't have as regular of service. But technical services includes our van. Technical services also oversees our interlibrary loan, which is the titles that we loan with other libraries throughout Ontario. As well as maintenance of the collection and any training specifically related to the collection and the ILS. Next slide, please, Lisa. And then we have the branch level and the work that the staff are doing that can be very varied. Things like patron registration and orientation, checking items in and out, collection and shelf maintenance, reference services, which is when someone comes and asks a question to staff of, do you know XYZ, or can you tell me where this service is, anything like that. Reader's advisory service is if someone is looking for their next read, that they can tell us something about what they're looking for in a book, and staff are trained to help them find if you're looking for a fast-paced mystery or a cozy mystery, and what that might be depending on what patrons' preferences are. Staff do a lot of technology and equipment assistance, whether it's through their formal tech times or just as people are coming into the branch asking for assistance. They do a lot of outreach in their communities, and hopefully you know about all of the wonderful programs that are happening in our branches, and they also engage directly with their local communities. I think the important thing to note about the branch level in particular is the variability with which anything can happen in a given day. A daycare may come in and you may not know that, and all of a sudden you've got 25 daycare children that are in the branch. You may have someone coming in that's struggling emotionally or mentally, and managing what goes along with that. And certainly all the tech issues of someone comes in and they want to download a book and they need assistance with that, or any of the other many tech issues that can happen that staff are managing a lot, and they don't always know what any given day is going to look like. Next slide, please, Levitsa. So we do have a partnership with all of our local municipalities to provide library service. At the county level, we provide the staff, the library lending materials, any of the furniture in the branches, any of the equipment, the computers, and the library services. And then the municipality provides the building, the maintenance that goes along with the building, cleaning of the building, security, and they also do pay for the utilities. We do pay an annual maintenance grant to all the municipalities based on the branch level that I will speak to in an upcoming slide. And we do have the facility agreement with our local municipalities that is on the memory stick. And just a reminder, as I mentioned last meeting, that we are currently revising that just to reflect current library service. There's not any significant changes in there other than a cleaning schedule, that just to make sure that the branches are being cleaned regularly, and some of the annual cleaning that needs to happen, but much of that is in line with what is already happening at many of our branches. Next slide, please. So speaking to those various levels of branches that we have, the first would be what we call our comprehensive library. So these are our largest libraries that provide the most services. They have a wide range of collections, including a local history collection. They coordinate many programs, which may include outreach to long-term care facilities. They are at least 5,000 square feet and are open at least 36 hours per week. They have at least 4 public access computers. And in recognition of that level of service, $15,000 are provided to our partner municipalities, and those are listed there. And just as a reminder that $15,000 is an acknowledgement of the partnership. It is not intended that $15,000 covers all of the utilities, all of the maintenance, all of that. It is just in recognition of that library service is a partnership and they are providing the facility. Moving on to the next slide, Labitza, we have our neighborhood enhanced libraries. So this is the next step down from our comprehensive libraries, that they do provide collections and services that are relevant to their local community. They have a program room. They meet all of the ARUPLO guidelines, which is the Association of Rural Urban Administrators of Rural Urban Public Libraries of Ontario. They meet all of those guidelines for a small branch. Again, actually, I should double check. I believe those are included on the USB sticks, but if not, I can share the link to them. So they are at least 2,500 square feet and open 24 hours per week. And in recognition of that service level, $12,000 is provided to our partner municipalities in Zurich, Brussels, and Bayfield. Next slide, please. And this is the last level of library service. These are our neighborhood libraries. So they are smaller libraries with less services, but they do still provide collections that are relevant to their community, just probably smaller number of materials available in that branch. They are physically smaller, but they are hopefully at least 2,500 square feet and open 15 hours a week. But we do recognize they most likely do not meet all of the requirements of a small branch. So thinking about perhaps our Kirktons, where there's only room for one computer in that small space. And $10,000 is provided to the municipalities in Blythe, Hensel, Howick, and Kirkton. Next slide, please. Oh, you have a question?
If the Blythe Library changes location, will it move up a step? Because it doesn't have enough room.
We would have to look at that. It depends where we move and what level of service we can provide out of that facility, whatever the potential facility would look like. So it's not a discussion we've had at this point. Yeah.
So may or may not happen.
Yes, and I think a good example of that would be, and this is before my time, but I believe, for example, the Brussels branch was previously smaller and then it was renovated and expanded. And I believe it moved up to that neighborhood enhanced level when it was more hours were added when that renovation was completed, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
So I mentioned these guidelines earlier, and these were recently updated and shared with the board this past fall. Again, these are the administrators of Rural Urban Public Libraries of Ontario. So that is a provincial group that I sit on. And we developed this tool for primarily rural, urban, or county libraries to look at that perspective of a multi-branch system and the level of services that should be required. And it certainly takes into consideration rural trends and considerations within Ontario. And it states parameters for meeting a variety of populations, and it has kind of an urban level, large, medium, and small, and various measures that go along with that, including guidelines for the number of staff that you would have based on a branch size or population that it's serving, facilities. So again, what's the appropriate square footage depending on the community size served, level of technology services, size of collection that should be available, hours that the branch should be open, and the amount of user seating that should be included in a branch. So for example, a small branch would include a population that serves up to 5,000 people. It should be 2,500 to 5,000 square feet, should be open 20 to 25 hours per week, have at least one staff member that is at least trained in as a library technician, or there is a library specific, it's called Excel training. It is not on Excel spreadsheet software. It is on various library collection development, serving the public type courses. The guidelines also include best practices. So these are kind of what we're aiming for. And then they also have various best practices that would say your children's area should be about 20 to 30% of the facility. Your training should not be less than 1% of your staffing budget, and best practices such as that are also included in those guidelines. Next slide, please. We do also have the Ontario Public Library Guidelines. These are province-wide. I also sit on this committee, and that is for all libraries, not just specifically rural, urban. This applies to any library. This is kind of the baseline of what we expect, and that's for the purpose of making sure that all Ontarians have access to a base level of library service. If you meet all of the parameters that is outlined in those guidelines, you could receive accreditation. Huron County Library is an accredited library. However, some libraries simply use it as a tool. They don't pursue accreditation, but they certainly look to those guidelines to make sure that they are still providing efficient library service. Oh, and there's something else I was going to mention about that. We'll move on because the next slide speaks to what is met.
Helena?
Oh, yeah.
Does accreditation affect funding from the province?
It does not, no. It has been a discussion whether it should be tied to funding, but at this time it does not. Yes. Yeah, you can go to the next slide, Lubiza. The one thing I was going to mention, sorry, was the distinction between the Ontario Public Library guidelines. That is kind of that minimum that you should be aiming towards. The ARUPLO guidelines can be more aspirational, but certainly say that a well-run library that provides exceptional service to their community should have this many hours, this many staff, that type of thing. So the things that the Ontario Public Library guidelines cover include governance, policies, planning documents, staffing levels, training of staff, accessibility of spaces is important, as well as having collections and your collections, partnerships with the community, and it also looks at your website. So things making sure that community consultation happens on a regular basis, that you have various policies, whether it's policies related to your collection with diversity, procedures for working alone is one of the requirements. Having an accessible website is a requirement. It looks at your multilingual collections to ensure you're reflecting your community. It looks at parking, shelving height, all of those things are included in the Ontario Public Library guidelines. Next slide, please. So ministry statistics is something that is available to us annually, and coincidentally, I have a report on that coming up later in the meeting. These are available through the Ontario Ministry of Culture, Tourism, Culture and Gaming's website. I have the link provided to you there. These are comparative statistics from libraries throughout Ontario. Annually, all libraries are required to submit statistics that are based on either a typical week that's mentioned here, where we track the number of people in the spaces, number of materials accessed, as well as other annual statistics and budgetary items as well. Your most recent statistics are on the USB stick, and I will speak more to those later in our agenda. Next slide, please, Lisa. So in 2023, the board went through the process of creating a new strategic plan that then launched in 2024. It will run until the end of 2028. Again, it is available on the website or on your USB sticks. It was created collaboratively through a committee that included staff from all levels of the library, as well as representation from the library board, and was approved by the library board. And we have our new mission, which is that Huron County Library brings people, information, and ideas together to enrich lives and support a thriving community. And our vision is Imagine More, a place to learn, connect, create, and grow. Next slide, please. So these last two slides, I just want to focus on some of the cornerstones of librarianship to ensure that everyone kind of understands where a lot of what we do comes from. And one of those is equitable access, that we recognize the diverse needs that enable everyone to participate, perform, and engage to the same extent. So it recognizes those diverse needs, that all are welcome. It is different from when we talk about equality versus equity, recognizing that some people will need that higher ladder to engage. And that may look like some of our policies. We indicate to staff that they do have their discretion to, if we need to have more leniency or waive a fine or something like that. Some folks may need additional tech help, and all of those considerations that make certainly libraries act to lower barriers to ensure equitable access, whether this is through our outreach in our communities to reach those who can't potentially come to the library. We do act as that free third space, and by providing free services, we are equaling the playing field, and a large part of our role is bridging that digital divide to ensure that everyone has access to the technology, Wi-Fi computers that are essentially required in today's society. Next slide, please. Literacy and lifelong learning. We provide free access to a variety of materials that appeal to different interests and learning types. It goes beyond just promoting literacy and supporting it. We focus on creating and supporting lifelong learning. That's through our collections, our e-resources, and our programs. So some of our databases that we offer that support that lifelong learning, we do have Mango Language, as I mentioned earlier. That's a language learning resources about geography, Reference resources, Canadian Reference Center. Science would be our PebbleGo for our students, and continuing education, things like Gale courses, where you can go on and do a course on a number of relevant topics. And things like our conversation circles, shared learning programs, story time, all of those support learning, literacy and lifelong learning. Next slide, please. Intellectual freedom, it certainly has been a hot button topic. It's maybe cooled down a little bit, but I think it's really important because it could pop up at any time. And that is the thought that users have the right to read, seek information, and speak freely, that we do provide a diverse collection that represents all viewpoints. And you can see in our collection policy that I quoted there that we resist calls for censorship and only including materials on one specific topic. Part of intellectual freedom is that we really want to encourage, and the purpose is to encourage conversation and discourse so that people are aware of all sides of issues and matters. And just so that folks know, this includes no filtering on our library computers, that folks can access anything on our library computers. In our collection policy, there is an appendix that includes the request for reconsideration. So if someone does have a concern with something that is included in our collection, they would go to our website and complete that form, and then we would take a look at that particular material. We don't remove materials just because one individual finds them controversial, that it would need to go through that process and then a decision would be made. And we do also have, the library does also have an intellectual freedom statement to clearly define our commitment to intellectual freedom. Next slide, please, Lisa. Lastly, I'll finish with privacy. This is a confidentiality of library use. So people's borrowing history, their personal information, reference questions that they may be asking. It kind of pairs with intellectual freedom, that we find that having a varied selection paired with the assurance that one's choices aren't monitored allows for unrestricted exploration and discovery without fear of judgment, embarrassment, or punishment. So examples of what that might look like in a library include not sharing patrons' borrowing history with others, not sharing if someone was or was not in the branch, and not making assumptions about why someone may be seeking a certain title or asking a certain reference question. And that is the end of my presentation. Hopefully that's provided a bit of an overview of the library board and libraries. I'm open to any questions now or always in the future if anything comes up.
Thank you, Beth. That was a lot of information, a lot of good information. Some of the things that I really noticed being the past chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee is the fact that how accessible our libraries are for everyone. Even I'll use the Goderich Library as example, as the stairways are, created the colors of the stairs for people with visual impairments, right? The fact that we have an elevator in the library, the bookshelves. We did a review of that library and I believe the Blythe Library as well. And it's nice that the aisles are nice and wide for people. And that thought process, there's a lot of thought process and some money spent in that, but it's important to see. And then you brought up the diverse needs where everyone is welcome, which is also important as well. So I appreciate those were part of your slide in your presentation. Does any board member have any questions or comments for Beth regarding the board orientation? Helena.
I have a question regarding this intellectual freedom that we allow all points of view, all materials. But I was struck by looking at the Challenges website and some things that are patently false. There was one book on soap making that ended up being withdrawn because they said add lye to the water, which is an extremely dangerous thing to do. Or no, to add water to the lye, which is can cause severe burns doing it that way, and that was withdrawn. So how do you, I mean, patently wrong information? In that case, it was not just wrong, it was dangerous. Is that up to individuals to challenge that, or?
If you have an answer,
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's a little bit of both. For sure that we work with a professional organization that selects our books. So we rely on them to do a lot of the filtering to ensure that what they're providing to us is factual, up-to-date, accurate. Sometimes things are accurate at one time and then they become inaccurate as we learn more information or that type of thing. So some of that does rely on, as we do our collection maintenance, having that critical eye. We certainly don't have the capacity to go through all of our materials. So part of it does fall to if a patron happens to recognize that there is something that we should look at because they feel like it's inaccurate, that's when we would go through that reconsideration process for sure. So it's a combination.
Is there any other questions or comments from board members? A lot of good information there. Okay, next, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask sort of a quite a fancy question almost, but we were talking about intellectual freedom and the right to privacy. For parents with children, are they allowed to access their children's borrowing history at all, or is that not a is that protected under the same privacy rights as any other patron?
Beth?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. No, parents can access their children's borrowing history up to a certain age. I'm trying to recall because we updated that policy last year. 12?
I think
We
so.
can get that answer for you. It's stipulated in policy at what point a child's borrowing history becomes private from their caregiver.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good question, Nick. Any other questions or comments from the board members? If not, I will go refer to the prepared motion here that Huron County Library Board receives the report by Beth Rumble, County Librarian, dated January 15th, 2025, titled Board Orientation as Presented for Information. Do I have someone willing to make that motion? Nick moves and Warden Heffer seconds. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to item 6, which is board member comments. Do any board members have any comments at this time that they would like to share? Not seeing any hands. We'll move on to 7, which is reports from library staff. And number 1 in the 7s is draft 2025 Huron County Library budget, which is also presented by Beth Rumble. You're going to hear Beth talking a lot today. So I'm surprised. Do you have water in this still? Yes, she does. Okay, perfect.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So you did all see the budget initially last month at our meeting. I have included those updates that was indicated about several piece moving from operational to capital, as well as $5,000 capital being added for the point of sale terminals that did not impact the levy that you saw at our December meeting. So I'm open to any final questions that folks may have. Just a note that this was presented to County Council last week. There was a question just to clarify the IT fleet pressures that we are having, and that is just to reiterate, because we are no longer eligible for the educational pricing with MS 365. And there was also a question about if there are funds included in this budget for a potential branch move. At this time, we do not have funds because there is nothing confirmed about a branch move happening in 2025.
Okay. Any questions from the board members for Beth regarding the budget? Helena?
I have a very small question. On page 42, it refers to leased photocopies. I think it should be photocopiers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the other is the donations. In the November budget to date, we haven't received nearly the donations that we expected to receive. And yet in 2025, we're expecting more than double donations. And what is that based on? Other than wishful thinking and the way the world should be.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. So as I tried to explain, but it is a little bit confusing in my last presentation, is the donations are not the donations that we expect to receive. Those are donations we expect to use in a given year. So that's when that is recognized. So the underutilized donation or the under revenue that you'll see for 2024 is just coming from the fact that we didn't spend as much of those donation dollars in 2024. In 2025, they are increased because again, we hope to spend those, but also it's driven by the McCall-McBain project as well, that those are all recognized as revenue and we have more spending through that planned for 2025.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
That's okay.
Should we be expecting to spend more on postage given the post office rate increases?
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. That's a good question that wasn't considered in this budget. However, even with that information, at this point, I wouldn't increase it, and I think we would monitor. We are grateful to receive a postage grant from the province to offset that. That was something new that came about when we started having to mail our interlibrary loans as opposed to using a centralized courier. But I think it does bear monitoring how much that impacts, that will be directly tied to the volume of interlibrary loans that we're mailing. Yeah.
Good question. Okay, you're good, Helena?
I'm good.
Okay.
That is better.
There you go. Does any other board member have any questions regarding the budget in front of us here? Not seeing any hands, so I will move to the prepared motion that Huron County Library Board receives the report by Beth Rumble, County Librarian, dated January 15th, 2025, titled Draft 2025 Huron County Library Budget as presented for information, and further that the draft 2025 Huron County Library budget be approved as presented, and further that the Huron County Library Board recommends that the Council of the County of Huron approves the Huron County Library budget as presented. Do I have someone willing to make that a motion? Helena moves, and a seconder would be Sydney. Okay, any questions or comments? Not seeing any hands, all in favor? Looks like all hands are up. Okay, so that's carried. We'll move on to item 2, which is the 2023 Ontario Public Library statistics presented by Beth Rumble.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So these are those annual statistics that I mentioned earlier. They're obviously trailing because we're a year behind. So these are numbers from 2023 to keep in mind. In the report and the charts, I've highlighted some areas of note. I think it is worth reminding folks that we're listed with our comparators, other county library systems. That is helpful to a degree, but we do need to be mindful of the variations between the communities they serve, the sizes they serve, how they compile their statistics as well. I mean, there are certain things where it looks like we could bear to consider, do we want to take efforts to increase our circulation of print and or our digital materials? I did include in those charts some information about our staffing levels, because that was one area when we were looking at those ARUPLO guidelines that we were finding we were under those guidelines. So you can see here that our staff per service point, as well as what we spend on salaries, is very much in line with what other libraries are spending. And also, I think worth reminding or to note that when we look at things as a percentage of our operating expenditures, that may indicate that we are either over or underspending in another area. So if we're spending a lot on staffing, does that mean we're spending less on our collections? And if you look, I encourage you, if you are curious, to go to the website and look more specifically at those numbers. One that I didn't include that I maybe could have was operating spending per capita. And that's a good way to see how much is Huron County Library spending per person versus what another county library is spending, if we want to look at how efficient we're being with our tax dollars as well. But I'm happy to answer any questions or take any questions. And if I need to look into further other statistics, I can do that as well.
Okay, thanks, Beth. Is there any questions for Beth regarding the stats in front of us? Warden Heffer?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Beth addressed, I had spoke to her ahead, so she did address some of the things that kind of stood out to me, and thanks for that, Beth. Just wondering if a chart with the spending per capita would be helpful to try and give a little better context, because what stood out to me was that our salaries as a percentage of operating expenditures were at the very high end. And then that's these last two slides, the last slide then on paid staff per service point, we're right on the average mark there. So I was just looking for, what am I missing? Just looking at the chart as to what could be the reasons why. So thank you, Beth, for that. And I just, first glance, it was are we missing some efficiency somewhere, or is there another reason? So that spending per capita, I think, would kind of give that last slide that would have put it into perspective for me. So,
Okay.
I'd like to see that.
Okay. And is that something we can
Yeah,
manage? Yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Helena has her hand up.
Question, kind of a follow-up to that. Huron County is a living wage employer. Are all of the other counties paying a living wage to their staff?
Interesting question.
It is, yeah. That's a good question. We'll have to do a follow-up on that, I guess, if we can.
Mhm.
I'm sure that's all public information.
Yeah, I can find out.
Okay. Any other questions from board members? Yes,
Chair.
Counselor Becker.
Yeah, just to thank Beth for this information, because it really gives us a idea how we compare to the other counties with our libraries. And it's good to see this. And what Warden Heffer said too, if we see what it is per capita, gives us more insight where the costs go to through the library system. No, it's great to see this. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments, Counselor Becker. Any other comments or questions for Beth regarding the stats? Not seeing any hands, I will move to the preferred motion, which is that Huron County Library Board receives a report by Beth Rumble, County Librarian, dated January 15th, 2025, titled 2023 Ontario Public Library Statistics as presented for information. Do I have someone willing to move that? Counselor Becker moves, seconded by Nick. Any questions? Not seeing any. All in favor? Okay, carried. Moving on to 3, which is board self-evaluation results, and that is also presented by Beth Rumble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I just want to thank everybody who completed the survey for taking the time to do so. I think generally speaking, it's very positive feedback, which is great to see. And also it's great to see that there are some areas where we can make improvements and where more information can be provided or the like. So I will make a point over the coming meetings to spend more time helping to understand the financials as well as the Public Libraries Act. Some of the presentation this morning hopefully helped with that as well. So please always continue to ask questions, or feel free to reach out if you have very specific questions about the Public Libraries Act financials or anything else in particular. And just a reminder that if we want to look at further training beyond just what I would provide to you about some of those aspects, we can look into that as well.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board members regarding that? Not seeing. Oh, yeah, Helena?
Did everybody complete that? Or should there?
There was one individual who didn't. I don't know who, because it was anonymous, so all but one.
Thank you.
All right, I think we can move on to the motion, which is the Huron County Library Board receives a report by Beth Rumble, County Librarian, dated January 15th, 2025, titled Board Self-Evaluation Results as presented for information. Do I have someone willing to make a motion for that, please? Helena moves, seconded by Patricia. Okay. Any questions? Not seeing any. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Moving on to item 4, which is the Alice Monroe branch, presented by Beth Rumble.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Most of the information is included in the report there for the board's consideration. That as a reminder, the steps that we took were to track any comments we received generally, but also specifically with respect to the name of the branch since July 7th. At this point in time, staff assessment is that we haven't heard enough feedback to make a decision one way or the other. So the recommendation is to continue as we have been in continuing to monitor for feedback regarding that.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions regarding that? Helena?
There's the comments were very interesting. I found that most people said the quality of her writing stands on its own.
Mhm.
That came through in the comments.
Mhm.
But also the information provided using BBC as a source, because they do a good job of verifying that the statement would be could be usefully expanded to note that Alice was not informed until many years after about the abuse. And so it's very hard to provide protection retroactively. But yeah, the timing, I think, is important. The guy was convicted, abuse was in 1976 for about 3-4 years. And the guy was convicted in 2005. So it gives you an idea of the gap.
Mhm.
So it's,
Okay, thank you for providing those comments. Any other comments or questions from the board? Nick?
I just wanted to comment positively on how the library and has decided to um, lay out what it's going to do, like what the plan was, and put it like a firm timeline on, like, we are going to wait 6 months and listen and then move forward. And I just want to applaud that, because it is easy for these things to just kind of let the news cycle turn over and just kind of end up swept under the rug. But I think that it's good to say we're going to do something by this time, and then do it, basically. So yeah.
Thank you for those comments, Nick. I would concur with that. It's better to take the time, have some public consultation and listen to the feedback. And far too often in our society, we react as soon as we hear something. And I think this is the right approach. So thank you for those comments. Greatly appreciate it. Any other comments or questions from the board? Patricia, please.
I would agree with Nick that the approach is good. It is a highly controversial issue. I sat on the Alice Munro Festival for Short Story, so I was aware of a lot of the feedback. I think one of the things I find very interesting is that there hasn't been more feedback. There's been, I think, even this past month, there's something written, I think it was either in the Atlantic or the New Yorker, I can't remember which news source, about it, the challenge about a number of people just saying that they will no longer read anything by her because it is so difficult to understand, when she knew a lot before 2005. Whenever he was convicted, information came out to her before then. So I think that part absolutely fascinates me in this, is that there hasn't been more input, and maybe it just reflects society's confusion when we have issues like this that arise when there's someone who is so greatly talented that does something that is morally problematic, to put it lightly. So I do think the approach is right, to continue to monitor and figure it out that way. I don't know what the right answer is when it comes to maintaining the name or removing the name. I think it's quite complicated, but I do agree with Nick on the approach of stating a deadline, following it, and I don't know, maybe another deadline. I don't really know what the best approach is, but I am absolutely fascinated that there hasn't been more comments on it, because in terms of social media and news sources, and there's been a lot of comments and just conversations I've had with folk in the community as well. There's just been a lot of conversation about it. And that's all. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia, for providing your comments. Greatly appreciated. Any other board members have any questions or comments regarding this? Alina?
so, I think there's a very interesting issue raised by this, which does not directly to the library, but a lot of abuse victims do not come forward until many years later. That's a common trend.
Mhm.
And so how do we make the world safer so that they can step up?
Yeah, it's a tricky one to maneuver through, especially for the victims, right? And you make a valid point there that, several years later, they feel confident or safe enough to come out, right? And I guess in saying that, they're coming out and sharing still, right? And we don't know what it's like to live in other people's shoes, but we can definitely when they do decide to come out or they do look for support, the resources are usually there for them to be offered. So it's an important thing. I think we've done a wonderful job over the past several years, even regarding, I'll go back to sports, but mental health in sports for our youth and for our adults. It was never looked at years ago, and now it's a big deal. Where you have hockey teams that actually have a mental health specialist on their team as a staff member. So those are things that are important, where there's someone that, someone can trust and provide information and have an open conversation with. And I think the trend is changing that way, where people are being able to provide, they have someone to talk to, right? And it's someone that they've built a relationship with. So that's important. So, but I thank everyone for their comments, because it is, it's a very delicate, conversation to have, even here at the board level. So I appreciate that. Is there any more questions or comments regarding this? Not seeing any hands, I'll move on to the motion that's provided for us, recommended motion. That Huron County Library Board receives a report by Beth Rumble, County Librarian, dated January 15th, 2025, titled Alice Monroe Branch, as presented for information, and further that the Huron County Library Board continue to monitor community feedback. Do I have someone willing to make that a motion? Jane moves and Nick seconds. Okay, all in favor? Carried. Moving on to item 5, which is the monthly update for November 2024, presented by Beth Rumble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'll just keep my comments on this brief to highlight a few things. There is mention in there of the Clinton shelving. Again, I encourage everyone to drop by the branch to see how that's looking now, and there are more upgrades coming from the municipality. We're hoping for paint and carpet, as well as the installation of the lift. So exciting things happening in Clinton. You will also see mention in there the Calling All 3-Year-Olds programs or events that happen throughout November. That's always an exciting time for staff to go out to all the local schools and meet those 3-year-olds who will be starting school in the fall. Lots of holiday programs and tie-ins with the local municipalities are noted in there as well. And lastly, I'll just bring your attention to the addition that Technical Services and Marketing did to add information about our library's newsletter to some of those notices that are sent out to patrons, to try and get more folks signed up for that. And that is something that Amy, our marketing and branding coordinator, is continuing to work on to encourage folks to sign up for our e-newsletter.
Okay, any questions or comments for Beth regarding the monthly update? Not seeing any hands, I'll move to the recommended motion that Huron County Library Board receives a report from Beth Rumble, County Librarian, dated January 15th, 2024, titled Monthly Update, November 2024, as presented for information. Do I have a mover to that motion? Alina moves, seconded by Patricia, or Sydney, sorry, Sydney, yep. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Up next is item 8, policy review, and 1 is Friends of the Library policy update, presented by Beth Rumble.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the board did see this last month. There was a comment, and we've worked to clarify the section that was slightly confusing or not, was unclear. So that has been adjusted, and this is now being brought to you for final approval.
Okay, any questions or comments for Beth regarding this? Not seeing any hands, I will go to the recommended motion. The Huron County Library Board receives a report from Beth Rumble, County Librarian, dated January 15th, 2025, titled Friends of the Library Policy Update, as presented for information. And further that the Huron County Library Board approves the Friends of the Library policy as outlined. Do I have a mover to this? Patricia moves, seconded by Helena. Okay, any questions? Call the question, all in favor? Carried. Okay, we do not have any correspondence, financial statements. Month ending November 30th, 2024. It does say presented by Lisa Harvey, junior accountant, and that's just basically the information provided in front of us. Is there any questions regarding financial statements? Not seeing any hands, so I'll go to the recommended motion that financial statements for the month ending November 30th, 2024 be received for information. Do I have a mover, please? Counselor Becker moves, seconded by Nick. Okay, any questions regarding this? Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Okay. We do not have any close to the public session. Next meeting will be on Thursday, March 20th, 2025 at 9 a.m. in this boardroom. Hopefully everyone can attend, and if you can't, well, I'll see your lovely faces on the screen in front of me, right? So it's a nice advantage to have. Looking for a mover to adjourn that the Huron County Library Board meeting adjourn at, that was the quickest hand I've ever seen at, I think Warden Heifer misses adjourning meetings, eh, Counselor Becker? Since he's now the warden, he's not able to, so he's gonna jump in whenever he can now, eh? At 10:06 a.m. So I have a motion by Warden Heifer and seconded by Nick. All right, thank you. Nice to see everyone. Enjoy the wet, fluffy stuff that we see outside. We do have winter, so thanks for attending. All in favor? Carried. All right, take care.